Welcome to Meeting Success, the podcast for the meetings, events, and entertainment industry. I'm Coach Pete Sackel, business and productivity coach and 30-year event production veteran. And I'm going back to my roots to reconnect with top leaders and entrepreneurs to uncover valuable insights on business and mindset. And no doubt, you'll hear some entertaining stories along the way from a colorful cast of characters.
Go out and make others feel important.
Every week, you will in fact be meeting success. Now, the stage is set, it's showtime. Hey everybody, this episode that you're about to listen to was recorded with the title, The Meeting People Podcast. Obviously, we've changed the name to Meeting Success. The guest and what we talk about is still very relevant to meetings and events, and I think you're going to love this conversation. So enjoy this episode of Meeting Success. Hey guys, welcome to the show. I am delighted today at the guest I have today. I think you guys are really going to enjoy talking to Josh and listening to Josh tell his story. Really interesting, I think, story and background. And so without further ado, Mr. Josh Pies of C47 Films.
It's good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. And you also have a podcast. I wanted to mention that in the beginning here.
I do. The Bootstrapped Unicorns podcast has a lot of similarity actually to your interests in entrepreneurship. Our focus really is on the actionable lessons you can learn from somebody's hard-earned bootstrapping to become the unicorn we all hope our business becomes.
Right, yeah, that's always the goal, right?
Yeah.
And you say a lot of similarities in the look as well. I think people will notice if they're watching this on video.
That's right.
There'll be some physical similarities.
Same studio at C47 Digital Studios. That's right.
C47 Digital Studios, right. Thank you for that. And so just, a little bit about C47 Films. What do you do? What's kind of your focus?
It's interesting because we weren't always the company we are now. We've had a lot of changes over the years, and some of it's just environmental changes because the internet has allowed us to do different things than we were capable of, even 13 years ago when we became C47 Films. But now, today, we are a production house that focuses on high frequency content. The demands of the internet are that you're producing content that can go out on a daily basis, multiple times a day if you're that bold. And it's hard to keep up with. It's hard to even plan if you don't have somebody who can guide that ship. So there's a lot of expert businesses out there that we can serve, and we do serve, helping them amplify their expertise, build trust with their ideal clients. And we do that, and sometimes just in the studio. People come in, they create anchor content, we guide them through that, and then we cut out all the small content that becomes all the social media hits that they need to build authority. And so that's the number one thing we do. Another thing we also do is digital courses. A lot of experts know their stuff, but don't know how to translate that into a digestible course. So we help with the intellectual side of figuring out what that course could and should look like. We help film a deliverable product, and we have partner agencies that actually not only make it a digital consumable, but they also help funnel it so you can sell that into a marketplace. And so we've just got the right partners in place to handle that. And then we also do a lot of consulting.
Right.
I never know who needs what when it comes to coming up with marketing solutions and or brand solutions. But one of my favorite things is when somebody goes, this is broken, and somebody said, I can't do that. And I go, oh, you can't, can you? Okay, so, and that's
challenge.
I'm always Mr. Challenge accepted. And so that's my favorite thing, is to go in with somebody and get our hands dirty, dissect what is a problem, or maybe a perceived problem, and come up with a new way to not just answer it, but answer it pretty loudly.
Right.
I think you've got a sense for who I am now, after hanging out a little bit.
Well, it's funny you say that pretty loudly. You have a kind of a reputation, and today you're kind of toned down a little bit. I know that.
It's funny. This was gifted to me, and I opened it up, and I was actually surprised that it doesn't have sleeves.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, I'll wear it. I like it. It's comfy. It's airy because we're in Florida, and it's kind of warm. But this is as toned down as I am.
Yeah, your jackets are pretty wild. I think you have you have a Spider-Man jacket. And
I do.
Yeah.
I have Captain America, Spider-Man, Batman. Pac-Man. I have my favorite bright yellow one now. I'm going to call the banana because I'm enamored with the Savannah Bananas. Have you found these guys?
No, I don't think so.
This is a baseball team in Savannah, Georgia. They're, I think, a single A ball club, but their leadership, their owners, have turned them into a show.
Yeah.
They break
Kind of like
dance.
the Harlem Globetrotters type of take on baseball. Yeah.
Absolutely. And actually, it helps that they're good baseball players.
Oh, yeah.
You know, when I was a kid, I was a baseball player.
The Harlem Globetrotters are very good basketball players.
Incredible.
They always
right?
beat the Generals. Yeah. I think that was kind of like, rigged a little bit. But,
I think that is actually their business model if you look at it, because they actually have a team that they play. I'm actually blanking on the team, but it's definitely...
I think it was the Generals that the Globetrotters played.
Yeah,
something like
it's
that.
the same model. It's basically the Globetrotters, but their social media presence is on point. I'm now proudly a super fan. Facebook has given me my little check that I am a Savannah Banana super fan, and I have the flippin' jacket.
I'll have to find that and start following them on the Instagram, as the kids say.
Yes.
It's interesting. A couple of things you talked about there as far as like the evolution of your business. I mean, especially these days, I think everything has kind of evolved so quickly. And
breakneck.
And I think that's like very common though in business, right? You start like a business, you have maybe a business plan, like a model that you're going into and going to do this.
Yeah.
But then a year later, you look back and it's like, man, this is like nothing like I thought I was going to do.
For sure.
And it sounds like your background, from what I know, I mean, you've taken a lot of different turns, a lot of tried some different things. And
so I mean, I've been an entrepreneur since I was 4 years old, legit. I was $1,600 cash positive annually starting at 4 years old.
At 4 years old.
Yep, my grandfather helped me start a manufacturing business. And then at 8 years old, we started another product line in my manufacturing business, and we can go dig into it, but just the legacy of pivots and changes. Then I focused on baseball for quite a while, and I got drafted, or actually not drafted, that's an unfair term. I was recruited by West Virginia University to play on their baseball team at the behest of the New York Mets organization.
Wow.
Really cool until you blow your shoulder. So that was a 10-year time period of my life.
You were trying to pursue.
I know. And I was a catcher. It's a big shoulder position.
Yeah, and knees.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. My knees are just starting to show that I was a catcher, by the way. 43 years old. Here we are.
Yeah.
But then, I tried 3 different businesses during college. Actually, 4 now that I think about it. I had a painting and contracting business. I tried being an author, and I have some great stories around that. Tried another manufacturing product for the baseball market. And then I happened into snow plowing, of all things. And that one scaled to a multi-million-dollar organization. That unfortunately didn't last through wild twists and turns. And during that process, I had tripped into doing a TV show to help rescue a friend's job. I kid you not. He was about to lose his job as the church media director at the church I had grown up in. And it was over the fact that he pulled their TV show off the air because nobody was watching. And he did the good thing. He saved them money, and that's an important thing to do. That was, it was his fiduciary duty to the congregation. And they said he slayed the sacred cow, and he had to have a better show on in 3 months or he was in trouble. So we helped him do that, and next thing you know, we've got a hit TV show that's on in over 1,000 markets around the world. And that was while I was doing this whole snow plowing thing. And when that disappeared, my wife, thank God, said, I really think you're better at that.
And snow plowing?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Being a contractor, you're gifted in this storytelling video thing.
Yeah.
Figure it out, Josh. And, the rest is history-ish. And we've had a lot of pivots within the business after we launched it.
Yeah. So just to go back a little bit, because I think a lot of people are like, wait a minute, 4 years old.
Yeah.
And then
it's all true.
So what was the product, the service at that point? And first, that's the first question. Second question will be a little bit more involved. So
okay, so the product, I discovered the product because you got to fill a need, right? Mm-hmm. My mom lost her car keys all the time, but my neighbor's mom, Jeff Cooper, his mom Dolores, she always knew where her car keys were. The solution was that they had a key rack by the garage door, and everybody who had a car or a bike lock had a key hanging on the key rack, so everybody knew where the keys are.
Makes
My
sense.
household didn't have that, so I said, we need a key rack. So I told my grandfather, and he goes, okay, we'll make one. I was like, cool, let's make something together, Grandpa. And so he took me to the hardware store, and we bought a 4-foot long, 1-inch thick dowel, wooden dowel. And then we bought a box of cup hooks. I don't know if you're familiar with these, but they're kind of a brass gold looking hook that you can screw in. Yep. There's a little cup on it that helps it finish it's got a look. It's got a great look to it. But it was 100 of them. And so we went back to the house and we made a key rack out of the dowel. We had 3 hooks on it, and we put 2 hooks on the side and used some yarn for the hanger. And so you needed 1 nail in the wall, and it would hang, and it would hang 3 sets of keys. Well, then Grandpa had me back all the parts out and stain it and varnish it. And I think I vaguely remember sanding the edges so there were no burrs. And then I very, very distinctly remember my grandfather, who was in manufacturing. He was a very patient man who was in manufacturing, a leader at Kodak. He goes, "What are we gonna do with all this other stuff?" Like, what do you mean? Well, we had 100 hooks, he used 5. We had a 4-foot dowel, he used 6 inches. What are we gonna do with this other stuff? I said, well,
Mass production.
Can we make another? He goes, we can make more. So he drew it out. He walked me through the math. We talked about, the loss of wood from having to cut. There's blade waste. Right. And I learned about that. And at 4 years old, he's got me using a radial arm saw and a drill press. And my mom did not.
I was going to say your mom, but that's what grandfather's great for.
Yeah, I know, yeah. And I'm coming home with sawdust in my hair. And she's like, oh, you guys are working on stuff together. I'm like, yep, Mom, we are. But then now I've got inventory. And he's telling me that it cost him money and I have to repay the bank. I'm like,
another important lesson.
Yeah, and so Grandpa didn't charge me interest, which was super cool. But he was the bank and I had to pay him back for it. And so we came up with a price of $2.50 per key rack, or you could buy 2 for $3.50. Significant discount. And you could get it in natural wood stained, natural wood varnished, or 2 different colors of stain. Because it was all stuff he had on the shelf. My grandfather was always Mr. I have this, because my grandmother always had him with the honeydew projects. Right. So we used some of that stuff, and I had a variety. And it was the 80s. I went door to door, knocking on doors at 4 and 5 and 6 years old, selling these things.
That's adorable.
It was great. Yeah, it was. I was door to door, and I was adorable. Yeah. And man, I made a lot of money.
That's it. I mean, it's like I think I had maybe a lemonade stand when I was 4 years old, like probably a lot of kids did, and and it's interesting. I mean, that's a totally different kind of take on that. Maybe a little bit of a lemonade stand on steroids. You're kind of like the Henry Ford of key hooks, I guess.
Yeah, a little bit.
But and so to that point, and one of the things I always I wonder about, and I like to talk to business people about this and entrepreneurs is, do you think that entrepreneurial spirit, first of all, like when you were 4, did it go through your head like what was going on? Like you were an entrepreneur, you were, fixing a problem. You were trying to, solve something.
I could not have articulated that I knew I was fixing a problem. I think that's a little sophisticated for where I was at. However, I knew I was in business. I lost a lot of my little friends because they didn't like coming to my meetings. I was gifted a chalkboard that was kid size that actually you could flip over, so you could have 2 different, work boards and a box of chalk. And I would have board meetings at 4 and 5 years old, and I lost a whole bunch of little buddies because I was boring. In kindergarten, Mrs. Fisher, my teacher, called my parents in.
Very good at recalling names.
Thank you. I'm trying. Yeah.
I don't know if that's true. If that was really Mrs. Fisher.
No, it really is Mrs. Fisher. Okay. Pat Fisher.
I'll look that up.
So go on my Facebook. You'll find her. She called my parents in. She's like, Josh is not interacting with his peers. And so my parents observed my behavior. Well, I was drawing marketing materials for my key rack business. And it was all hand drawn on typing sheets.
During class, so you were there thinking.
Well, no, during class I was in class.
Well, it's kindergarten. I mean, was it really like?
I wasn't eating paste. But I also wasn't playing with.
Instead of napping, you were like.
No naps, no toy play. I was doing marketing plans. Okay. And
completely normal.
Yeah, right. Completely normal for a boss baby. That was me, and I liked the challenge. It was exciting to meet people, and I'm a people person. It was very gratifying to a couple weeks after, when somebody would buy it, and then later they go, I'm using your key rack. Like, so good. Thank you. Please tell people about it. I'd actually say, and I didn't know I was asking for a referral.
Referrals, yeah.
But I was like, please tell
social
people
media.
about it.
Oh wait, that's not invented yet.
Yeah, long. I mean, I hadn't seen a cell phone yet. So yeah, it was just that was me at 4 and 5 years old. So for me, I was an entrepreneur just because I was an entrepreneur, and I suppose there are some born entrepreneurs. We were off the air.
Right.
We were kind of chatting about that. I know people can build entrepreneurial capacity and do it without having that bone.
Yeah.
I actually had that bone in my body.
You know, it's interesting. You know, like you said, we talked about this a little bit before, but I think that, you know, you talk about kids. I mentioned like the lemonade stand. I mean, a lot of kids, you know, still do that today. I mean, I see that.
I saw one the other day.
Yeah. And I think that, you know, when you're that young, I don't think you really dream of like, you know, hey, I'm going to go work for somebody someday and punch a clock and, you know, work 9 to 5 and all that stuff. It's always like, no, I want to do this. I want to, like you said, be an astronaut. I want to, you know, do something that is making a huge impact, you know, type of a thing. And so I think it's almost like we are kind of born with this entrepreneurial spirit. And you can go back and look at like the history of business and commerce and everything, and like you know the blacksmith in town. You know, it was like it wasn't I don't want to become a blacksmith and go work for, you know, Blacksmith Corporation, you know. Type of thing. It was like, okay, I'm going to set up shop and do my own thing. And so I think, and then corporations were created, and then we adopted that in that model. But I think that, you know, we all kind of are born with this kind of mindset that, you know, anything is possible, and I can, you know, do this and work for myself and all that. Then I think we just kind of get almost like trapped.
We do.
And I'm my story is very, you know, much that I, you know, and you know, I was told by my parents, it's like, okay, you graduate college, you get a good job with a good company, you stay there, you get the benefits, and you retire and all that stuff. And it's like, okay.
I think that gets conflated with the American dream after people say, oh, the American dream isn't entrepreneurship because I don't believe in myself enough to grab it.
Yeah, which is kind of ironic in a way, because you think about the American dream. I mean, how the country was built. It's very much like, no, I'm going to do this myself. You know, it's a very pioneer, you know,
manifest destiny.
Yeah, it's just like, I'm going to take this and do it myself. And then, yeah, we get lulled into this trap. And I think it was, you know, based on consumerism and lots of things that kind of, you know, brought us into this trap. Like we have to go for security and all that, which...
That's an illusion.
I was going to say it's more of an illusion now than it ever was. But... and again, my story, I fell into that illusion, and then was laid off, you know, and 3 times. And by the 3rd time, I was like, okay, I get it, you know. Yep. And I decided, okay, I need to go out and kind of, you know, be an entrepreneur. But I think that entrepreneurial spirit, I think, is kind of within us all, and I think it's really important to maintain that. Even if you go and become an employee of a corporation, whatever. I think it's still important to have that sense of entrepreneurship where you can, you know, basically be ready for anything. Like because you don't know, things could, you know, leave tomorrow and you have to go and recreate or do something different. So,
well, and that's why I think intrapreneurship, you know, people who are entrepreneurial within their job, is an important thing, not only for the business that you're a part of, but it's a skill building opportunity that if that business, for whatever reason, doesn't have a place for you, if some legal change happens in the world and your business no longer could even operate, no fault of the business's own, and everybody's out of a job, your intrapreneur experience can become an outward entrepreneurial gift for every employee.
Absolutely.
And I think not enough people do that. And I will say entrepreneurship, I think you would agree, is not necessarily for everyone. Right. And without people who are not specifically destined for entrepreneurship, we would not have the employees that we can trust and allow their talents to shine. Like, I'm blessed. I have some phenomenal employees who are good humans with great talents that I can walk away and know that the job at hand is in great care. Otherwise, I'd just be a guy with a small business doing my thing. I wouldn't be an entrepreneur. I'd be a dude with a job, but it's a self-created job.
Right.
And my growth potential for C47 would be out the window. Right. So we do need some people, and I hope everybody's got some entrepreneurial spirit.
Yeah.
But we can't all be entrepreneurs.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good distinction. Maybe that you know, it definitely. I think it's good. I think you would agree too. Like as a leader, as a manager, as a boss, you want to, you know, I think strong leaders respect and appreciate somebody who's got that entrepreneurship.
Yes. Oh yeah.
I think that, you know, if you're not such a strong leader, you start feeling insecure if somebody's like, you know, going a little bit too far and kind of overstepping and taking maybe more responsibility than you think they should. And that's like that business owner that, has to have that control of everything. And they just want the minions to kind of, do what I say type of thing. And then they have to be there all the time to manage that. So
yeah, and I think that's positional leadership, where it's like, my job title is manager, but I don't embody the term leadership.
Right.
And that's where, you get fraidy cat managers who are afraid of the people under them because, they're actually not leaders. They just have a positional leadership.
Well, and it's interesting because I just thought of this the other day. It's like, to me, there's no such thing as a bad leader. You're either a leader or you're not.
That's right. That's right.
So, I mean, it's like you can't be a bad leader, because if you're bad at what you're doing, then you're not leading.
That's right.
So
I can totally agree with that.
now, I know you've got an interesting story. I want to get back to the snow plowing business for a little bit. Because you laugh now. I'm sure it wasn't very funny at the time, but
it was awful.
Tell us a little bit about that.
So yeah, I'll
story.
tell you how I got into the business first, and then we can get into the harrowing part of the experience. So I had just graduated with my undergraduate, and I was the first triple major in college history. I had 3 degrees that I got concurrently, and you would think,
are they all different? It seems like, from what I've heard so far, it's like a baseball player, snowplow,
yeah,
films.
I'm all over the place. I get it. Yeah. So I had I started as a student of business. So it was a business administration degree with a focus in marketing. And then I was like, this is way too easy. And then I looked at the school schedule and how things overlapped and where credits overlapped. And I thought, oh, well, if I add an entire extra major in economics, like X number of classes cross over. So it's actually, in my opinion, like a heavy minor, but they stand alone. So I'm like, I'm totally doing this. So I got permission from the dean. They're like, yeah, Josh, go for it. You get your straight A's right now. You'll be straight B's soon. Well, I was still straight A's. And I was still really comfortable. And then I had, because I was in a liberal arts college, I had to take a logic and inquiry course, which was in the philosophy department. And I fell in love with it. And then so I had a couple of electives that I still had to take. So I took another philosophy course, and I said, oh my God, I love this.
So you were like, philosophy, I love this. Snowplow business.
That's right. So anyhow, that was a long answer to, 2 were related and 1 was unrelated. And I wish I had had the confidence to go, okay, I have my degrees, off into the world. But I was like, no,
It doesn't sound like you lack confidence to me. Huh?
Well, yeah, but I was convinced through some family pressure that I needed to get an MBA because I should start in upper middle management. Like, there's no way I should start at the ground level. Josh Pies doesn't start there.
Right.
Which
Macy's has got a great executive program.
Well, and I just don't. Looking back,
You're from Rochester, so it's probably the Kodak.
It was the Kodak track, But at that point, Kodak was kind of waning, so nobody would have sent me there. But that is the kind of the mindset, right? And so everybody was just like, "Go get your MBA, so you can show up and have the paper to prove that you deserve a top position." I actually don't subscribe to that theory anymore, but I had enough influence around me that I did subscribe to it at that point. So I go and I'm at RIT, Rochester Institute of Technology, getting my MBA, which ended up being in technology entrepreneurship. And I will tell you, the greatest benefit in the MBA was meeting the people that I would encounter who would challenge me towards greatness. The information was generally repeat from my undergrad.
Was that like professors, you mean, or like other students?
Professors, yeah. I stayed in touch with a lot of professors who have given me a lot of amazing guidance, a lot of great connections. And so those forged relationships are real. And that was the whole benefit. Nothing against RIT, but had I been, let's say, just a philosophy student, and then wanted a business background, then the MBA program would have been perfect for me.
Right.
But I spent a lot of money to get the same information. Very frustrating. Yeah. But anyhow, during that time, my car broke down. I came from a reasonably poor family. There was no, I'll buy you a car.
Right.
There was no credit for that. There was no cash for that. And at that point, I was spending my I'm being silly here, but my millions of dollars from my small manufacturing company. That was all gone because I had to live life. And so I had the wise idea. I live in a snow belt at that point. Let's make the truck pay for, or a vehicle pay for itself. I'll go buy a plow truck and I'll just do a run. I can do the homework on my passenger seat. I'll just do a driveway run. I'll get 80 driveways. It'll pay for the truck. It'll pay for some food. And I'm already coasting, barely doing my homework and getting high Vs. I'm good. Well, that was the theory. And then I happened on an opportunity that I will be honest that my father is the one who uncovered the opportunity to land 14 Eckerd drugstore parking lots.
Uh-huh.
And instantly I understood that commercial property for snow plowing was absolutely the way to go. These little onesie twosie houses, if you could not get them all in a row in like a whole housing track, was a waste of my time and very challenging and tons of management. These large parking lots were way more profitable.
Yeah.
So
another great business lesson. I mean,
yeah, right.
Yeah.
So we took them on, and I say we. It was just me with a truck, and I also had no backup truck, and that was dangerous. So I took on some more properties. I said, hey, I got this contract. You should hire me in your commercial property. And for whatever reason, that cachet of saying, hey, I've got this property, you should hire me here, worked. And so now I've got even more properties. And I still only have one truck.
Right.
So I went and purchased a bit of a beater pickup truck as a second, just as a backup. For the life of me, I don't remember who I had driving it, but eventually I put somebody behind the wheel of that.
Yeah.
And fast forward a couple of years, I had hired my father, who kind of hired himself. He's a felon, ex-con, unhirable. And in most situations, like he could have worked a car wash or something where he couldn't have access to money. But he was very overweight, unhealthy, so there was no manual labor in his future. And through, once again, family pressure that I was pretty adept at caving to, I just kind of let him stay.
You were how old at this point?
23.
Okay.
So.
And he was doing what at that point? Was he driving or was he?
Well, no, you see, this is the problem. I let him into the office. And so now he's management in my company. And I had this, back in my mind, your dad can't harm you.
Right.
He's your dad.
Right.
He's never going to do any of that white collar crime stuff he would reserve for all of the other humans on the planet, but never you. And as you can tell, I'm foreshadowing the fact that I was quite wrong.
Right.
But so we grew the business. At one point, I'll give you the quick stats. We had 35 employees plowing about 25 million square feet of parking.
Wow.
Every time it snowed. We had 12 wheel loaders. We had 6 dump trucks. We had 6 pickup trucks, 3 farm tractors. We had 2 sidewalk crews with landscape equipment that had small blades on them so we could plow sidewalks. It was big, and there was a lot of money flowing.
Yeah.
We're talking, $250,000 to maybe $500,000 a month during the winter.
And you owned all that equipment, everything that was from the
No,
company?
highly leveraged.
Yeah.
Highly leveraged. Very dangerous position to be in. We had a mechanic, Carl, Vietnam vet. He was one of my baseball coaches as a kid, but he used to work on helicopters and tanks and all these things. He was this gristly, combat.
Right.
Chew and spit
Fix
and
anything to
swear.
fly the mission.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I had a lot of older equipment. It was a lot of used equipment. And in the snow plowing world, that's very common. But it also means that there's ghosts in every machine. And he found every ghost, patched every ghost, usually with the MacGyver
It's great to have
version.
Carl.
Oh,
Right?
Carl was amazing.
Yeah.
And he could MF-er the heck out of a machine, and it was really fun to watch him kicking the tire. And it wasn't kicking the tire to see how it was, kicking the tire because he was angry at it. I have a lot of Carl stories we could probably do a whole episode on. But God love him, he was the greatest.
Yeah.
So I have some great memories from that experience. But and we built it big, a lot of cash flying around. Without getting too much into the balance sheet and what my personal net worth was at the time, let's just round and say I was basically millionaire status. I don't know for certain based on the numbers whether I was
23 back 20 years ago. So
yeah. I mean, it was real deal stuff. I could pay for whatever I wanted whenever I wanted it. Thankfully, I wasn't quite a spendthrift, which is great. Shannon and I took 1 or 2 really nice vacations, but there was a business to run, and I was pretty focused because I wanted it bigger. I wanted to be in 100 cities.
Right.
That was where I was headed with this. Well, I had missed some pretty gross mismanagement on my dad's side. I didn't see it. And
you think you physically didn't see it, or you didn't want to see it? Was it something like you?
a little bit of both.
Yeah.
A little bit of both. I think more physically, frankly, than I didn't want to see it. It was really well hidden. I'll be honest, I think I'm going to skip some of the gory details on what exactly he had done and how it affected me. But what I will say is it crashed my business.
Yeah.
I really crashed it. Within a couple of months of me discovering it, we were in bankruptcy court.
Wow.
And I will tell you, there's some really gory details about how, and a good warning for anybody who's listening, if you hire family, one thing that my dad did as a great manipulator, and he really was an amazing manipulator, He had a mantra that he shared with everybody. When you don't hire family, you don't fire family. You either vote them in or you vote them out. And so that was him, self-preservation wise, that he knew I wanted to fire him.
Right.
And he knew I was going to want to fire him way before that was ever a thought. But he had been planting that mantra for every family member. And we had a lot of family members working in the business. I had probably 6 at one point out of 35. I actually bought into some of that, where it's like, oh, so if I tell, Joey that he can't work for me anymore, he also is no longer a part of my family according to how I've operated. And so he can't come to Thanksgiving because he's out of the business. That type of thing was the really toxic culture that my father was.
So was the idea in that like basically saying like, no, don't fire him because you don't want to be in that situation?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. We had to keep all family no matter how awful they were.
Right.
Even if it's a charity case, they weren't doing any work at all. They could be stealing from you. You can't fire them.
Right.
You just got to tell them stop it. And that's it. Well, when I
basically saying that firing them is worse than whatever they did.
Yeah, and years later, I read some stories about how like McDonald's, when you want to buy a McDonald's, and actually this is a really true story. I ran into Bruce Smith, the Hall of Famer quarterback, flipping burgers at McDonald's. Didn't make sense. I'm like, this guy's a millionaire. What did he spend it all? Is he a crackhead? What's going on here? And no, it's that McDonald's makes you be the janitor, the fry cook, the flipper, the assistant manager. Like you got to do all those things for an extended amount of time, go through McDonald's University before you could possibly buy a franchise. And I think you have to pre-qualify financially before you can even do any of that. And that's pretty rigorous. Yeah. And then you'll hear some really brilliant entrepreneurs go, yeah, my kids can't work for me. If they're going to be in this business, they got to work for one of my competitors for at least a couple of years. And I'm friends with my competitors, they know, and I'm going to hire their kids if they ever want to do it too. We're going to do a kid exchange because I don't want my kid working for me, getting lazy, thinking everything's going to be handed to them. Yeah. They got to learn the business. And that type of care and awareness I didn't have. I'm 23. Mm-hmm. I'm hiring cousins and uncles and brother-in-laws and all these people. And I wasn't mature enough, and that's not something that you get taught in business school. Yeah. Nobody talks about legacy planning for your business when you're 21 years old going through an MBA.
Well, and I think too, I would think the same thing, like, okay, it's family, I can trust them.
Right.
Well, who better to have, in my business, who's going to care,
but if they
more
don't
than
have the
family?
skill sets, if they don't have maybe a shared moral code, yeah, they're family, but they're a different human, and maybe they don't know how to be a professional and care for family. Maybe at Thanksgiving dinner, they're a riot and they make the best food and the hugs are real and the stories are great, but they're just not the right person for your business. That had never come up.
Right.
And so it was a massive blind spot for me. And 2020 hindsight, I am older and wiser, and I just learned the hard way that was an untrue mantra. And so I'll tell you, the day I fired my dad after uncovering everything that he had done.
Basically stealing money.
Stealing money. He stole a fortune. He stole about $250,000. And so I remember him leaping out of the kitchen chair in my childhood home and trying to attack me. And so we had a very brief fist fight that I won very quickly. And I left him on the floor and I said, you can hire and fire family. And I walked out the door. And I didn't darken the family homestead for 10 years from that point. And it was because of what he did in the kitchen that he had no boundaries that I wouldn't go back to that house. However, I will tell you, I didn't draw a conclusion that I had to vote him out. So events anywhere other than the family home, I was at, he was at, we could tell jokes together. He'd ask how I was doing. Really? I would tell him. I don't want money to destroy family. And so and my wife was not on the same page for a little bit, but then she saw that our family on a family side, business aside, had a culture of gatherings that was ingrained in us, that if I had allowed a war to happen between him and I, then his mantra would have been true. Right. His personality was so big that he would have won and I would have been excommunicated. I would have fired him and then therefore fired myself. Right. So if I wanted access to the rest of my family, I had to be the bigger person.
I was just going to say you were the bigger man. I mean,
Yeah.
and it's like, and I wonder too. I mean, do you think your dad, did he learn something? Did he?
Oh no.
Never had remorse or anything like that? Or?
He actually pretended to have remorse one time, and it was to get me to show up to an event that I wasn't sure I was going to show up to, because he was a little bit on the spotlight.
Right.
And so I got a big mea culpa from him, and then the next day I happened to run into him out and about. So I started having coffee with him, and he started doing all the same old stuff. It all turned back on again.
Really?
I recognized it. I called him on it, and then he started trying to get physical with me to fight me over his misbehavior. And I thought, I really do think the distance was healthy.
Yeah.
And funny enough, it wasn't even for another couple of years where I fully cut him off and never talked to him again.
Yeah.
And when I fully cut him off and never talked to him again, do you want me to go there? I mean, because this one's like,
sure.
It's almost it's a little raunchy, to be perfectly honest.
Mm-hmm.
And this is not business. This is now in a family setting. And I guess the lesson for anybody listening to this is sometimes you actually have to draw full boundaries for your own health and also the protection of your spouse and your children. My windows were being replaced, and my brother-in-law was helping me do it. He was driving to come see me so we could help do it together. My brother-in-law is an amazing human. And he happened to drive by my father picking up a hooker in the city. And so Steve called me. This is now in the age of cell phones. We've moved that far in time. And so he called me. He goes, I don't know what to say, man, but this is what I just saw. And I jumped in my car and tried to track my dad down. And I didn't catch him. But then I called my mom and I said, all right, my brother-in-law's character, Mom. He doesn't make this stuff up. What he saw, he saw. You guys are young enough that I don't want to think about this, but Dad could get you sick with his behavior, okay? You need to call him on it really hard. Let me know how it goes. So then they got together and they called me together to berate me for being a bad son for trying to cause problems.
Your mom and dad?
My mom and dad. Mm-hmm. So they ganged up on me together.
Did your mom know stuff like this was going on, you think?
Oh, tons of it. I mean, during his criminal phase, where it was all in the newspapers because he was such a bad dude, it came out in the newspapers that he had 3 separate families.
Oh.
And my little brother is from another mother. He had a stripper in a house 4 or 5 towns over. I mean, this guy is a Lifetime movie waiting to be produced.
Right.
And
maybe you could produce that film.
Maybe, yeah. I mean, there's so many other cool stories. I'm not sure if he's the story I want to focus on, but it's interesting that, it took that level of her choosing blindness, unsafe blindness, and defending him over me, where I was like, oh, I really do have to finally say it's not about the money anymore, it's protection of my family.
Yeah.
And maybe it should have happened earlier.
About your family, meaning your wife?
Yes, my wife and my kids. Yeah. I mean, once you're married, your spouse is more important than everything, and if it's not, you're doing it wrong.
Right.
And then as you add children, your spouse and your children are priorities. And I'm of the ilk where if your spouse is not top priority over your children, then your children don't benefit. Because the moment you neglect your spouse and you harm your marriage relationship, I don't care how well adjusted your kids are, they will be affected if your marriage
created
sucks.
That divide, yeah.
Right. Yeah. So that's how I'm wired. And so when I realized that it was so unsafe to have my parents as an influence in my kid's life, and my wife's headache kept coming back every time we dealt with my parents anyhow, right? Because she hated seeing what they represented in my personal life. It was just time. I'd given them, the bankruptcy was 2008, and this is now almost 2015. I had given them roughly 7 years of massive grace. And for it to turn into you're a bad son for trying to protect your mom thing was just beyond comprehension. Yeah. And so it was done. And it's kind of interesting now that I kind of step back and you go, a lot of entrepreneurs are mistaken for being, type A personalities who can kick ass and take names. That's not synonymous necessarily with entrepreneurship, but I was very strong and courageous and confident in my abilities. And so I've tackled a lot of businesses, and I continue to do that, and I love every bit of it. But I am now at 43, very self-aware that 23-year-old Josh had some blind spots about personal relationships where I was not the alpha because there was a bigger dog in the show. My dad was the big dog. And so understanding how other people's personalities and behaviors affect my decision making is a real thing. That awareness allows me to be far less affected, hopefully not affected at all, by the manipulative side of people's personalities.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, talk about lessons learned. There must have been incredible lessons that you took away from that. Just changes that you made in yourself, like you say, it made you tougher, more resilient, perhaps, maybe more, less just trusting with, blindly trusting individuals.
Blind trust, yeah. And so there was definitely a blind trust thing. And of course, I was raised in a charismatic Christian church where there was a lot of blind trust of leaders,
right,
until and the leaders that are still in place there and in that church I grew up in are outstanding people, but there was a lot of people that had been installed in that church who broke the faith and harmed relationships as well. And I look back and I've got a couple of strong lessons where leadership, my dad has leadership, doesn't mean he's good at what he's doing,
right,
and leadership, the pastor, doesn't mean the pastor is good at what they're doing. And so critical thinking,
good. Right. You can be a leader,
positional
doing
leader.
Evil things.
That's 100% true.
I hate to you bring it up. It's like the example you hear all the time is Hitler. He led people.
Oh, he sure did.
But yeah, so
and all of that I think has bearing on how it shaped me to be just real.
It's got to be tough. It's your dad. I've had bad business partners and things like that, but not somebody that close to me that you're like kind of look up to. Maybe at some point. It sounds like you have kind of that background. Maybe it was not the wasn't the Ozzie Harriet.
There's nothing Ozzie and Harriet about my upbringing, but I will say that it's a really, because I try to be a realist about people now. I try to be as pragmatic as I can. And my father died this year in March, and I hadn't talked to him in years. And truth be told, I didn't attend the funeral because I actually didn't want to be the poison in the room, because there's a lot of people who perceive my distance from him as mean.
Right.
And so I chose not to attend, though I almost did. And I could step back and go, he was very charismatic and he was a great baseball coach for kids. And there was this bizarre caring element to him that is counter to a lot of the other behaviors. And so there were things about his personality that I've actually inherited. The gregarious guy in the room who, everybody knows when he walks in the room, and there's a lot of fun to be had. I can turn that on. And that's very Steve Pies. That's very much my dad. And so, though his legacy is extremely marred by a lot of crazy, and my God, I could go for hours with stories of negatives, but I'm also real that there's a lot of positives there. So I'm trying, with anybody I encounter, I actually want to be aware of their negatives and their positives, and try to be fair about it.
I think that's really, really insightful, and really shows a lot of emotional IQ, what's it called? EQ,
I guess. Yeah.
Emotional intelligence.
The old sound guy in me thinks of EQ, and I'm like, the knob
I know,
that
that's
I
right.
turn.
It didn't sound quite right, but but I think that you're right. You're spot on, and it's like we have to look, I think, at situations and at people that come into our lives for why did this happen? Why was this in my movie type of thing? And there's always something that you can kind of take away from that. Tony Robbins always says it's things don't happen to you, they happen for you. And so I'm curious, with all this stuff that happened and then moving forward into business, how did that kind of change, you think, your trajectory of where you're going in business? How did it make you kind of make the choices that you made since then? And what did happen since then? How did you get into film and all that?
That part's an interesting story, but if you give
everything's an interesting story. This is like you definitely have a book in you.
I might, yeah. And anybody listening to this who's a publisher, if you want to work with me, here I am. But before we go to what happened after the Logic Group, which was the name of the snow plowing company, I want to tell you a quick story of something where I was being influenced by my dad, and we had a very bad storm. We had a couple of pieces of equipment go down. And Carl's son had started this is Carl, the maintenance guy, had started a mechanic's shop, and I sent one of our pickup trucks over to get repaired by him, and it was way behind, just super behind schedule. Their business was, underfunded, and it just did not have capital. Shoestring, bootstrap, great effort, and I'm proud of them for trying. and his son Richard, who we used to call Big Dirty, he fell into a really messy pond when he was the first baseman on my baseball team, and we never forgot it. So Richard Big Dirty Ernst, who I love dearly and will always appreciate him, I went apeshit on him. Screamed till my voice was gone, threatened his life and his business partner, who kind of deserved it, but even so, I had turned into the monster that my dad was. And I'll never forget that. I was about 24 at the time, maybe turning 25, somewhere in there. And I look back on that as the lowest day I've ever had in business because I wasn't me. There was not an ounce of me in that moment.
Did you know that at that point, when you were in that moment?
I knew it about 5 minutes afterwards when I got in my car. And I was scared because we weren't performing for our customers that day. It was a very bad day. And I was fielding a lot of calls that were angry calls, and they were right, and I was in the wrong for sure. We were not a good business that day. And I had treated somebody with the most irate disrespect that I had, my business and a lot of my dad's mismanagement had set this scenario up. It wasn't them. And I just wasn't me. And I knew it about 5 minutes later. And I didn't know how to apologize. Eventually I figured out how to say it. And Richard, thank God he's the human he is, because he heard it, and I'm very glad. But absolutely my lowest day ever in business, not even the bankruptcy day. Because the bankruptcy day, at least I was doing honest things where we closed out a lot of debts. We paid a lot of debts on, just on the way into that bankruptcy that made small businesses whole. And I really actually held my head high that if you're going to go down, you're going to go down making all of the most honest decisions you can. But I look at that and I go, whoa, did I fall? I fell really far. And so I keep that day in my mind, and I actually talk about that day pretty openly because, never do I want to revisit that, and I always want to empower everybody. And that's actually one reason why my podcast I'm so passionate about, and talking with entrepreneurs about their lows and their highs and their journey, is because we're all going to have the bad days in entrepreneurship. And I really needed a mentor. That day I desperately needed a mentor, and all I had was a criminal. And so going forward, I just keep that in the back of my mind, that you can't turn into that. Every moment, in the good and the bad, it needs to be a teachable moment, needs to be a growth moment. And if I can walk out of a situation knowing that I've left something about that situation better than how I entered the situation, then once again, I can hold my head high and I can champion the next day. So that was the most formative moment in the entire thing, is the day that I lost myself and noticed that I did. And it changed how I operate as a business person forever. But then, so what actually truthfully ended up happening, and I love this story, a friend of mine, Dave Siriano, who is super cool, he got the job as the church media director at a mega church in Rochester, New York. And his brother-in-law is the pastor. The media director was in charge of the church TV show. Well, back then, the church TV show was just the pastor preaching and a little song service. And they're paying for the production and paying a little bit of money to be on the air. And let's be honest, it was advertising. It was trying to get people to come through the door. So they could, obviously, they're not looking for the donations and the offering plate. They're looking to change lives. But it was so that they could build a relationship with the community. The heart was right, the approach was wrong. And Dave saw it because nobody was showing up, nobody was watching. The viewership was insanely low. And so he took it off the air. And he slayed the sacred cow, bottom line. The church had a little bit of maybe hubris that we're the church with the show. And so he was told he's got to put his show back on. And he said no. And he actually did the right thing. I'm not putting that back on. It's a waste. So they said, well, you better put a better show on, and you have 3 months to do it. And I do wonder if the fact that his brother-in-law, who is a dear friend of mine as well, Steve, is the pastor, maybe that's why he got the grace. If maybe there was no family relationship, maybe he was just gone. But the truth be told, he was still there. So he started a TV show called 360 TV, faith-based sketch comedy. And he had actually...
Faith-based sketch comedy.
Yes. He called my wife after he filmed our wedding, actually, in 2006. And he said, Shannon, you're really good on camera. Would you act on my show? He didn't call me. I wasn't invited. And Shannon goes, we're still newlyweds, Dave. If we're not including Josh in this, then I don't really want to do it.
What were you doing at this point in business? What was your...
Well, it was kind of the swan song of the Logic Group at this point. We were towards the end, but I didn't... At this point in this conversation, I didn't really know the end was here. I knew something was wrong, but I didn't have my finger on it. I had this impending doom feeling. But this was a breath of fresh air. We got to play. We got to get cameras out and try things, and we didn't know what we were doing. We went to the library and and got books out about how to write a TV show, how to turn on a camera. Like we knew nothing.
So at this point, you didn't have education, you didn't have any any kind of background in.
No, I mean I had been an actor,
production?
so I'd been on stage in big productions as a child many times.
Oh, okay.
So from the time I was 4 till about the time I was about maybe 20, I'd done a lot of acting, and I had also done a lot of sound reinforcement for the church. So I knew mega church sound system.
Right. Okay.
So I had some stuff. It was useful for sure. So Dave tells my wife, he goes, "Oh, he's funny and he can probably write something. Just bring him to the meeting." So I'm the tag along. Fast forward not very far. Next thing you know, I'm writing, I'm producing, I'm acting, I'm directing. I hadn't touched editing yet. I had to self-teach myself that later. But we did really well as a big group. There's about 15 of us all throwing down. But I would say that I was the most active, fully unpaid volunteer in the group.
Right.
And this show ended up just having a trajectory that is beautiful, but you couldn't make it up.
Yeah.
We're paying to be on in Rochester, New York, our home area. A guy visits from Buffalo to see family. And he goes, "Oh my gosh, this is great. We need this in Buffalo." So he had some strings he could pull, and he got us on for free in Buffalo. So now we're in 2 markets.
Yeah,
okay.
that's like big shift in the business model there.
Right, I know, yeah. And then in the Buffalo market, apparently somebody who was part of a company called TCT that had 15 or 20 regional Christian stations said, "Well, we need this on our network." They saw it, and so now we're on, let's call it about 16 or so networks, in different markets. So cool. We're regional celebrities, and we're actually getting the occasional email like, "That was a great episode."
Yeah.
We're occasionally getting people showing up at the church going, "We saw your show and we want to hang out with the fun weirdos." It was working. And so we kept going, and we were just having fun. It was like a club, very, very regimented, diligent in the sense that we had meetings, we had to show up, we had deadlines, we had to get a show on. But then somebody from Trinity Broadcasting Networks, which of course I didn't live in Orlando, so I didn't know TBN was local to here in Nashville. This was somebody happened to be in the right market to see it, tracked Dave down and said, "Hey, can we put this on TBN's white label called JCTV?" JCTV was marketed towards 16 to call it 30-year-old male-female demo. And so it was youthful, it was fun, it was going to be free because they weren't going to pay us to be on the air. But we're like, okay, sure. And next thing you know, Sky Angel, which I know my sister used to have this, is satellite-based. And, you can watch Sky Angel in Kenya and, Philippines and all over the globe. You can watch Sky Angel, and we were on Sky Angel suddenly. I actually don't know how we ended up on there. Now we're getting fan mail from Japan, from Kenya. We're getting all these places, and of course, I don't know if they could understand our show or not, but we must have been animated enough to be interesting. I don't think we were dubbed into other languages. I think at best we were probably subtitled. But this had become a thing.
Were you getting income at this point, or
no, broke as can be, and now I'm bankrupt, by the way.
No, good.
So and talk about I had this humble time period of about a year, where now we've got a baby, we have an infant. I am the former millionaire snowplower. I feel like I have a lot of egg on my face because Rochester is a pretty small place, so everybody knew I kind of went down. And I had to work the Home Depot paint desk for a while to figure myself out, and I was diligent about it. They almost didn't hire me because I was way overqualified. But I worked very hard because I knew they had good benefits. So I had to work part-time to prove myself and wait to go full-time, which meant I got no benefits until they were willing to scale me up. But they didn't trust that I wouldn't be maybe undermining or overtaking the manager's authority or anything like that. I was a bit of a live wire. And actually, one of my former snowplowers, his daughter was in charge of HR, and he got me in. So that's how I got in. I have 4 college degrees, all this experience, and I can't get a job at Home Depot.
Right.
But I diligently worked the paint desk, and I was also in martial arts 6 days a week. And I was in the best shape of my life. And I ended up getting asked and offered to be a bouncer in a nightclub. And I did that for a year or 2, and it was under the table. I didn't know that when I took the job, but they were paying me out of the till. And I was like, man, I'm desperate right now, and I got to figure it out. So I didn't plan on staying there very long, and then that was a harrowing experience because I defended a young lady who was getting beat by her boyfriend, but apparently I defended too hard, and they were like, "You're on the edge of getting arrested. Get out." So I lost my job as a bouncer for defending somebody. So it's just a really weird transition time frame. And of course, I'm on a Christian TV show and I'm bouncing in a nightclub, and that didn't feel right. But I needed the income, and I kind of felt like I was protecting people.
Did you ever have the thought at some point, like, okay, like Home Depot's a job, but like, did you ever think about like going to get a job that suits your background?
So
and
there
just,
was
like,
a brief time period.
That, you know.
No, you're onto something here. I wanted stability because I was afraid of losing everything again. Mm-hmm. So I decided that with my background, I'd be the future police chief of Rochester, New York, and I would go and take the physical test, the written test, and go become a beat cop and work my way up to become chief of police. Right. And I thought, gee, with all of this unique education, I might be able to bring something really positive into the future of Rochester, New York. So that actually is why I was working so hard in the gym, and why I wasn't trying to climb the ladder, maybe corporate over at Home Depot or anything like that, and why I wasn't pounding the pavement trying to find a job. Because also at this point, I've been an entrepreneur my whole life. Right. I'd only had a desk job as an intern for a couple of years, and I didn't like it. I didn't like not having the challenge of championing my own future. So this was a time period where I didn't really know who I was going forward. But again, we had this show, and this thing's interesting. I'm chasing being a cop. Shannon hates the idea. She likes the idea of the stability, but she knows me. Yeah. I'm the one who's going to jump in front of a bullet because it just would happen. Yeah. And so she asked me to stop pursuing that, and the look in her eyes was all I needed. So now my plan's gone, and we've got this hit TV show. And there was a point later in the future, I'll never forget, I was actually, when I was gainfully employed in our own film and television business that we know as C47 Films, I'm behind the scenes at a major concert series, filming interviews with international superstars, and I'm producing all of these and shooting them, and it was a great day. And then somebody comes running up to me, "Oh my God, it's you, it's you, it's you." And I'm like, "Oh, no. Red is on stage right now. I kind of look like the bassist. They're up there." And she goes, "No, you're Josh Pies from 360 TV, and my whole family has every episode of your show on DVD. We own them all. Wow. Can we get a picture? My kids are gonna die." I was like, "Oh my, what?" So we had actually really affected people, and I'm really proud of learning that and having that one celebrity moment. Some people actually bought us some, like not groceries, like restaurants would comp us food sometimes because maybe the waiter or the manager would recognize us. So we actually were being watched. But I had never put together that was a life that I could do, because Rochester, New York's, it's a small venue. Everybody in media is entrenched. You're not going to become the next news anchor. You're not, and there's no shows being produced there except for ours that is turning $0. So it never connected that maybe there's an advertising industry I could go into. And when Shannon challenged me on the show, or I'm sorry, on the cop thing, she said, "You are good at 360 TV. Everybody likes to work with you, and you have all this business background. You need to figure this out. This is you." And she knows me really, really well. And I couldn't wrap my head around it that day, but it was stuck in my head that I knew, again, the look in her eyes, man. I can read her, she can read me. I knew she was right. Yeah. But I had no clue how to show her in the world that she was right.
How to monetize it, right? I mean, you're doing this great thing. You think it's a great show. People appreciate it. You're getting recognized, but no money's coming in.
Right.
So how do you take that and
so I kept going, with anything that was making me money, I kept going because I had to. And then I had the bright idea to self-finance burning copies of the TV show, 150 copies of the DVDs of a TV show. It hurt to burn that many DVDs. It cost me real money back then. And I printed my resume, which included all of my background and 360 TV on there. And I was so broke we barely had gas. So I was having people drop me off in regions that I mapped out in different parts of the town where I could walk from media company to media company, ad agency to ad agency. And I did 5 days of walking to 150 different businesses to knock on the door, find the receptionist, say, "This is my resume. I'm your next great hire. Who is the decision maker? I'm not leaving till I talk to them." I got kicked out of 130 of them. Pretty much like it was too bold for them. I got 3 or 4 immediate meetings, didn't bear fruit. I got one at a place called Animatus, an animation company that I had no place being in, but the owner, Fred Armstrong, I'll never forget to this day, Fred Armstrong, he looked at me and he goes, "Kid, let me watch your DVD, but I'm going to watch it with you. You tell me why you did this." And so we watched the DVD together, and he goes, "You know what? You're not Oscar worthy yet, and you're not going to win an Emmy, but I see raw talent here. Can I ask you to not give up?" And I was like, "Oh." And he goes, "I don't have a place for you, but there's a place in this industry for you. You can't give up."
Wow.
And that was the fuel for me to start callbacks. I started calling people back, and I landed a job as the director of marketing and lead producer for a very established small 6-person video production company. And I got paired with a woman named Anne, who is a 9-time Emmy winner, who put me through basically film school for a year. She kicked my ass. And she was a great human, but she kicked my ass. Yeah. And I learned in the trenches. And I departed from them because the owner had done something that I considered shady. I called him on it, and on a moral stand, I could see in his eyes he was starting to see my point, but his business partner didn't and booted me hard. And so Shannon goes, "Well, I guess you're going to be an entrepreneur. We're doing this." And I was like, "You know what? You're right." And so within a day, we hung a shingle as C47 Films, and we haven't looked back. And boy, we've got at this point like 75 industry awards, both regionally.
When did you start C47? What year was that?
Father's Day 2010 was literally the day we decided it. The day after Father's Day 2010, we were filing papers to have a DBA, and it was full steam ahead. Nice.
I mean, it's an incredible story, incredible journey. I mean, there's so many lessons you talk about as far as just resilience and keep going. The networking. Just you never know who you're going to run into where that opportunity is going to come, or that influence and that motivation. You're going to run into somebody that tells you don't stop, keep going, or this is what you should do. There was so much. It sounds like so much introspection of who you are and what you want to do and what you want to become and all that. I think it's just an incredible story. So today, like, what, for anybody listening, I mean, what kinds of things would they call you for? What's like a good, your kind of core business at this point, and what?
So yeah, I mean, back then when we started, the internet was really slow. So you didn't create. Yeah, really. I mean, we didn't quite. I think we had cable modems at that point, but it was a world where you create one expensive video that stands for a handful of years. And then YouTube was barely a thing when we were doing 360 TV, and it was starting to become a trend by the time I had, discovered that I needed to move forward into this, and thanks to Shannon's, urgency for me. And then Facebook came out at some point in the middle of us doing 360 TV, and that was kind of a thing. But the demand for high frequency didn't exist. So it changed our business at some point when both speed and the social networks became viable for high frequency content. So, and of course, marketing, right? Frequency and reach. You want both. Right. You can reach a lot of people, and because it's inexpensive to have basically that server space and access to a lot of people, you can justify frequency if you can find a way to bring the cost down to deliver a lot of stuff. So that was my mandate. That was in C47 Films. We had to figure out how to take our ad agency clients, the businesses that are authorities in their industry, and help them express their expertise with high frequency so they can work on growing their reach and build an audience, a tribe that knows and likes and trusts them. Mm-hmm. So our ideal clients are businesses that largely are service businesses. That's more of our clients are service than anything else. And they are serving because they're experts in their industry and in their particular niche, and they are needed by people. Mm-hmm. And those people need education, they need awareness, they need maybe some entertainment, but they ultimately need to build enough trust in these businesses that when the time arises that they're needed, they're calling my client, the one that they trust. Right. So that's the description of who we need to work with as experts.
So through video, you get to know these service businesses that you then build that trust and everything.
Right.
Yeah.
And some of our clients are using the videos almost as a library, so that when they get an inquiry of like, we don't understand this and we think we need to hire you, then the library video gets sent out, and that helps get to the next meeting because the understanding's there and saves like a 2-hour conversation.
Right.
And then it's helping close work. And we have one client, that's exactly what they do. They have a very small following on YouTube, but the library use through sharing by an email to the right prospect is closing 7-figure deals.
Right.
And then we have other clients who their long-term goal, and it is definitely a long-term game, is to be seen by a larger group of people as the go-to authority in their niche.
Right.
And both I think are extremely viable. I think they can run together, but that's our main client base, so that's what they're doing.
Excellent. So just to kind of sum it all up here and to close, I mean, what would you say is like either the biggest lesson you've learned or the biggest surprise maybe of being an entrepreneur that you maybe didn't think was going to happen either in your business, to yourself?
Well, I think in my youth, when I've always been an entrepreneur, and everybody's almost fandom. I had family fandom. Everybody was like, "Oh, Josh is going to make it huge." Grant Cardone wasn't a thing then, but he's probably the most modern version of what I think everybody thought I was going to turn into.
Right.
The guy who steps onto the plane, lands the plane, steps onto the helicopter, lands the helicopter on the 9th green to meet, the president to go golf 2 holes.
You're only 43. I think that's still in the cards for you.
And I'm great with that. And I will tell you, I absolutely plan to and need to be rich because I get driven crazy when I don't have opportunities to fill needs. I don't necessarily need the credibility of having filled the need, but it drives me crazy when there's, say, good people suffering. Yeah. And I could be a part of the solution, and maybe in small ways I already am, but if I could write a check and really change it, I'd sleep a lot better. Yeah. And as you can tell, money isn't that big a deal for me in the sense that like I've gotten over a lot of money losses. Right. It doesn't really matter. Right. Money's a tool, and I want enough of it that I can use it for good. Yep. So that's where I need to be. But everybody thought I was going to get there, and unfortunately for me, I bought into it enough that and I kind of got there. I was very much on my way, and then I lost it, and now
which
I'm on my way back.
I think Grant Cardone, but all these guys, the girls, had these stories of ups and downs and making money, losing money. It's an entrepreneur's life in a lot of ways. It
is, and I've come to grips with that. Yeah. But there was a time where if you notice in my story, I was going to be a pro baseball player, and I lost it. I was a young millionaire with a business that was getting written up in national magazines, and I lost it. And so I had an identity crisis, and it's a trap to become the entrepreneur who is tied to your business. Right. Now, my identity now is I'm an entrepreneur who is passionate about entrepreneurship. Yeah. The business matters because it's important, and I have to work it.
But to get there at the time.
I'm no longer the video guy. Yeah. I'm no longer the entertainer. I'm the entrepreneur who cares about people and growing my influence in ways that are important for the people. The venue doesn't really matter that much anymore.
That's a great point too. I'm glad you brought that up because it reminds me of, you hear a lot about like people talking about passion. Oh, you got to do what you're passionate about, and that sounds great. It's like, but there's things I'm passionate about that I know I just wouldn't be able to do or make money at, so. But I think that, like, kind of what you're saying is get to that point where it's almost like what's the greatest common denominator here? What am I really at the heart of passionate about? Right. And like you say, and we've talked about this before about some of the things that you want to do with money. And I think if you can like just look at it that way, like focus on if you want to, whether it's help kids with cancer or the homeless or whatever it is, you get passionate about that impact and that contribution you're making to the world. Yep. You get passionate about that, and then, like you say, you're kind of open to opportunities to get there, to give you those resources to be able to do what you're really passionate about. And it could even be something, if you're passionate about pickleball, maybe you're not going to be a professional pickleball player, but if you have making money and you can have time to go play pickleball and whatever, it's be passionate about that. So I think
but then be passionate about the advancement of the sport and the health that can come from it and the relationships that can come from it. Don't become, I find it worrisome when somebody's like, well, I've got to be the best pickleball player on the planet. Because once you are the best, where do you go from there? Right. having an infinite play where it's like, I can never affect 100% of the people on the planet in a positive way. There's too many people, too much to do. But if I'm willing to try, I always have something to work on.
Yeah.
And so, let's go with pickleball. That one came out of left field for me. Frankly, I don't even know what it is other than it's kind of like table tennis, kind of like tennis.
It's actually, I mean, I think everybody, it's huge. I mean,
I know, it's enormous.
Yeah.
Everybody talks about it. But if you're going to do like a club sport type of a thing, how does that club sport affect people? And then if you can find the passion about the effect on the people and the brilliance and fun that is being had in the sport that happens to be that lane where you affect people, then affecting people is the focus.
Yeah.
And that right there is portable.
Yeah.
Because affecting people happens in other places too. And it's a larger mission. And I think for me, that larger mission as an entrepreneur. And again, back to even my podcast, I want that to affect other entrepreneurs. The stuff that you're doing right now, our conversation right now, I hope will affect some entrepreneurs and give them some hope that no matter how deep they are in the thing that is crazy and scary and awful, trudge through it.
Yeah.
There is another side, and there's light on the other side. You got to trudge
other people
through it.
going through it. Have been
absolutely.
Through it. I think the other thing too, just to kind of put something on top of that, the passion thing is that, we want to make this big impact in the world, right? And I have a goal to, help 1,000 people in a positive way and all that stuff. And I think sometimes though, we kind of get caught up in that, it's got to be huge. We got to make a big impact. And I think there's so much you can do just to another human being. I mean, small things just to start really making a huge impact in the world, and it's the butterfly effect and all that. But it's just smile at the cashier.
I know.
Ask them how their day is. I mean, at the end of the day, that's we can do that right now. We don't have to listen to another podcast. We don't have to read another book. We don't have to go to another seminar. Yep. We can make big changes right now just by being nice to that that person that you
that's right.
And even like like the story with your dad too. I was gonna it's like. I mean, your dad is gone now, but it's like you can still work on closing that space between.
Oh yeah.
And you don't need the other person to close that space. If you have conflict with somebody, it's like you can close that space and within yourself. So the point is we have it right now within us all to make an impact and to really contribute. So well. Great conversation. I mean, we could, I'm sure, go on for another hour and a half, 2 hours. And,
have me on when it's time. I'll come back.
We'll do definitely a Josh part 2. But lastly, where can people find you?
Okay, so C47Films.com is our main website for our business. BootstrappedUnicorns.com is the easiest way to start learning about the show, and so it gives you links to the YouTube channel, gives you links to go over, and we don't release our first episode until October in the podcast ecosystem. So in October of 23, that's where you're going to be able to find links
on Spotify and
Yeah, so we have this great aggregating system, Libsyn, that makes sure that once we upload our content and we basically hit the go button, it goes out to all of the podcast ecosystem: Apple, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Odyssey. It's just it's a syndication platform, so it'll be on all of those. And then we actually have a free group for entrepreneurs on Facebook. It's the Bootstrapped Unicorns Entrepreneurship and Marketing Group. So it's an application, it's free, but we want to make sure that entrepreneurs and entrepreneurial-minded people are the people in the room.
Awesome. Well, that's great. And again, I can't say enough about Josh. I mean, I think everybody can hear that. You've got an incredible heart, incredible soul, and the way you want to help people and everything too. So I can't say enough about if you need Josh's services, you won't be disappointed. Definitely reach out to him. And thanks everybody. Thanks to Josh. Thanks everybody for listening, for watching the Business People Podcast. And until next time, Coach Pete saying, see you later.